It was one of those mornings where the sun seemed a little too bright, and the air felt too still, like the world was holding its breath. I was sipping my coffee, half listening to the birds outside and half watching my grandson, Ethan, as he stirred his cereal with more enthusiasm than he ever showed for eating it. My daughter, Claire, was upstairs getting ready for work, and her husband, Mark, had just gone out to start the car, as he did every morning. Ethan was humming to himself, spoon clinking softly against the bowl, when he suddenly said something that made my heart skip. "Grandma," he said, with innocent curiosity. "Daddy does something weird in your car after he drops you off." The spoon froze halfway to my lips. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" I asked as casually as I could, my pulse quickening. He looked up at me, his big brown eyes filled with the simple honesty of a child. "He sits in your car for a long time, Grandma. Sometimes he talks to someone on the phone. And one time, he was laughing. But there was no one else there. I saw him put on your perfume too. The one in the little blue bottle?" I set my coffee down so hard it sloshed over the rim. Perfume. My perfume. I hadn't left any perfume in my car. Or so I thought. That was the moment something in me shifted. The ordinary morning air suddenly felt heavy with suspicion. When Claire came down, I tried to mention it lightly. "Ethan said something funny," I told her, smiling too brightly. "He said Mark likes to sit in my car after dropping me off." She frowned slightly. "That's strange," she said, brushing it off. "Maybe he's just making calls before heading to work." But that explanation didn't settle the knot in my stomach. The next day, I decided to test something. I asked Mark if he could drop me at the grocery store on his way to work, just as he sometimes did. He agreed easily, smiling in that warm, polite way that made it impossible to suspect anything sinister. When he pulled up to the store, I thanked him, stepped out, and pretended to head inside. But instead, I looped back around the parking lot and found a spot behind a van where I could see my car clearly. Mark didn't drive off. He just sat there. At first, I thought maybe he was checking his phone. But then I saw him reach over to the passenger seat and pick up something small and shiny. He looked at it, smiled, and sprayed it into the air. My perfume. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then he leaned back in the seat, looking heartbreakingly peaceful, as though he were somewhere else entirely. My heart clenched. This wasn't the behavior of a man cheating or lying. It was something else. Something deeper. That evening, when everyone was asleep, I went out to my car. I searched it thoroughly, and tucked inside the glove compartment was a small velvet box. Inside was a silver locket, one I hadn't seen in over a decade. Inside it was a tiny photo of my late daughter, Emily. Emily, my firstborn, Claire's older sister. She had died 15 years ago in a car accident. In that very car. Suddenly, it all made sense. Mark had never known her. But Claire had told me once that when she first introduced him to our family, he'd been drawn to Emily's old photos. He said, she looked like the kind of person who could light up a room. He had asked a lot about her. What she was like, what she loved, how she laughed. But over time, as life got busier, we'd stopped talking about her. Maybe he hadn't. The next morning, I approached him gently. We were alone in the kitchen, the house still quiet. "Mark," I said softly. "Ethan told me something interesting about you and my car." He looked startled, but before he could speak, I added, "I saw you yesterday." "With the locket?" His face went pale. He set down his coffee, hands trembling slightly. "I didn't mean to upset you," he said quickly. I didn't know how to say it." "Say what?" I asked. He swallowed hard. "When Claire and I first started dating, she told me about Emily. I never met her, but I don't know. I felt like I did. Sometimes, when I drop you off, I sit there and just talk to her. It sounds crazy, but it calms me. Like she's listening. Like she's still part of the family." Her tears blurred my vision. I wasn't sure whether to feel heartbroken or deeply moved. He went on quietly. "When Ethan was born, I used to talk to her about him too. I'd tell her she'd have loved him. I guess it just became something I'd do, without thinking. That day, for the first time in years, I felt Emily's presence in a way I hadn't since we lost her. Maybe she really was still here, watching over us, binding us together in ways we couldn't fully understand." Later, I told Claire. She cried, of course. But when I showed her the locket, she smiled through her tears and said, "Maybe that's her way of reminding us she never left." From then on, we stopped tiptoeing around Emily's memory. We spoke of her openly, her laughter, her stubborn streak, the way she loved rainstorms and lemon pie. We brought her photo back to the mantel, right where it used to be. And sometimes, when Mark dropped me off, I'd hand him the locket and say, "Tell her I said hi." He always would. Months passed, and our family grew closer. Ethan learned about his Aunt Emily in bedtime stories, and he'd say, "I wish I could meet her." And I'd tell him, "Maybe you already have. Maybe she's the reason we all found each other." Because sometimes, love doesn't end when life does. It lingers. In memories. In small gestures. Even in something as simple as a man sitting quietly in a car, talking to someone he never met, but somehow knew. By the time the next summer rolled around, our mornings felt lighter. Breakfast was full of laughter again. And every time I caught the faint scent of that old perfume, I smiled. It wasn't just perfume anymore. It was connection. A reminder that love, once planted, never really dies. It just finds new ways to stay alive.